Welcome back to the Talk Shop podcast, and today I have with me my guest at this time, John Wang. How's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me, Richie. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, yeah. So let's see. So we were just talking earlier about that you do corporate work, which is like a lot of narration, things like that. Tell us about, in more detail, what is it that you do? Who have you been with, like Beijing Olympics, things like that?
That's a long time ago. Um, so I kind of started as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to write music and stuff like that for video games, film, and whatever comes my way. And
Nice.
I was like, hey, you should try doing voiceover, offering voice as a part of our audio package.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I looked into it and then kind of got hooked. And it's kind of how I slowly transitioned more and more toward the video side of things. Um, I'm from Calgary, so there's not a huge VO scene here. When I opened up the studio, our go-to was kind of like going to the Asian markets because of, well, I'm Asian. Yeah. So that's kind of how I started working more and more with Asian companies, and then eventually led me to connecting with Buford from CCC. Uh, and then he asked me to be the head of education when he wanted to open up an official school that's closing credits. And so now I am working, I guess, at closing credits as managing the programming there. And then I run a bunch of different studios around the world.
It's nice. That's cool. So you were in studios and you were doing video game music. So before we go any further, do you game as well?
Oh, of course.
So what are you like playing right now that you're enjoying a lot?
I am a big ARPG fan.
Nice.
So if it's an ARPG, I've probably played it all.
That's nice.
I'm playing Path of Exile right now. It's a new
Hmm.
season just launching. I was playing Diablo 4 a little while back when
Nice.
it was having a lot of hype around it.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's stuff I enjoyed. Played it for like a good 10 years or something now. That's on Path of Exile.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Diablo 4, and it was one of my friends who got cast in it earlier, and he said, I got cast for a big job. I was like, what is it? I can't tell you, but I'll tell you at some point, because he signed an NDA. And then we find out, I was like, oh my God, he got cast in Diablo 4. So, and I've heard a lot of people, especially people coming into the industry, they're like, yeah, we grew up on that. Um, people just seem liked it because it was fun. Thanks. So, real quick to talk about video game music. You had composed gaming music. I personally love gaming music in general. I lost count of how much I put on the playlist. At this point, I just stopped counting now. But what? Tell us more about that. That sounds good and interesting too.
I mean, me writing music for games?
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't say I was anywhere close to like a professional composer or anything like that. It was always my hobby. I think I started improvising on the piano when I was like five or something because my grandpa had this old piano on there. Probably sounded horrible, but he smiled. Then sometime around junior high, um, it started really getting into making music. And I do have a composing minor, so composing minor at my university.
Nice.
Uh, and then that was around the time when I started getting these small gigs from local game studios that was here at the time. One of my good friends was a project manager for a local studio,
Right.
so I did some work for him, but I wouldn't say anything was like super hype or anything like that.
It's all good. I think it's always good to see, like, especially nowadays, you see a lot of video game music coming out and people enjoy it, whether it be something in a JRPG, an ARPG, or COD even. Like, uh, I, I, I think I was listening to one of the themes from Black Ops 4 because I really enjoyed it from Zombies. I was like, oh, this really hits right here. I'm down for this. So it was good. So going into the topic of being a voice actor, what what is it that, so you explained that you got into being a voice actor because people recommended it. It was like, hey, why don't you try this? What is it that caused you like enjoyment in the process? Like why you do this? You're like, oh, why'd you stay around? Put it that way.
Um, so I've always been like in love with anime. I grew up in Japan, and then when I first came here, Dragon Ball was still Dragon Ball instead of Dragon Ball GT. So I was
Right.
still like 6 years from catching up to where I was at. So I was disappointed by that, but I digress. I loved anime, and because of my childhood, I love Japanese culture in general.
Nice.
So voiceover was always like one of the mystical areas that I was interested or fascinated by. I just never considered it as something that I would do. And then when my friend asked me, "Hey, why don't you try it? Right? Or rather, why don't you offer it?" I was like, "Well, okay, I'll take a look at it and I'll give it a try myself." And around the same time, one of my kind of personal issue I had was I was kind of a recluse
Mm-hmm.
because I would spend all day writing music at home and I enjoyed that. So I didn't engage a lot with oral communications anymore.
Right.
And I tried voiceover. I was like, oh, it feels like I'm talking again. So it has this weird liberating feeling that I can use my voice that I
Mm-hmm.
never considered. I did enjoy singing karaoke with my friends from time to time.
Nice.
And so uh, it was actually coincidence that my wife had bought me a Blue Yeti to record myself at home if I was to sing. And I tried it and I learned how bad I sound when I sing, and I never recorded my singing again. But doing voiceover was a lot of fun.
Right.
Uh, it was like I could be someone that wasn't myself, and because I'm hidden, there's no footage of me doing it or anything. It was like a hidden guilty pleasure almost. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, and then that piqued my interest, and initially when I first started, I actually joined a Japanese voice acting circle.
Okay.
Uh, so I did a lot of my voiceover when I started. I did in Japanese
Right.
as a part of this community,
Nice.
and then it was like every Saturday morning or something like that. For me, it's morning. For them, it's evening. Um, I would pop on like a Skype call, and then we would read a few audio plays and audio dramas together. And I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty fun. And then eventually, wanted to take it more seriously because I was like, oh. The other part was the first audition that I ever made in English. I got cast, and it was just on a whim. I found it on, I think it was Behind the Voice Actor. I could be wrong now, it's been so long.
Right.
But I didn't know what it was. There was very little detail, just like a Halloween event for a community center. And I don't remember what it is anymore, but I just remember it was a 30-second thing. I did it. And even though I didn't say it was paid, they paid me $200 for the spot.
Nice.
Holy crap, voice acting. It was the only thing I ever got casting for like the next 2 years, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like it piqued my interest enough that I wanted to look deeper and deeper. And the further I got into it, the more fun I had. And also because for me, writing music was always like a passion, a hobby.
Right.
I started trying to do it as a career. It took a lot of the fun out of it. There was a lot of, how do you say, requirements on the client side. I couldn't write the music that I want. I had to write the music that fit within, some kind of a framework. So voiceover became something that I can still be a part of the audio industry, but it didn't take away from my hobby, which is to write music.
Nice. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And when you mentioned about growing up, you would usually just stay inside, like writing music all the time. It's interesting because I had a similar experience when I was growing up. After about sixth grade, I was just staying inside to write. I didn't write music, but what I wrote was, I was like, it'd be so cool to like write a story down that I've enjoyed from video games. And then I started writing it down. Then I was like, oh wow, 20 pages later, here we go.
No, for sure.
It really helps, like, because what it sounds like for you is it really helped establish that skill, because it helped me with typing. I will say that, even if my fingers started cramping after a certain after a certain amount of time, but it's like those times really help get that creative bone strengthened.
Hmm. You get into the flow, and then time just passes, and then you realize the sun's coming up, right?
Exactly. Definitely. Okay, so moving on to it, what is your process when approaching a script? Like when you're given a script for e-learning or anything like that, what is your process? How do you go about it? Anything like that?
Mm, First thing is to ask the client as many questions that I think is necessary to get a clear idea of what they're wanting. Um, for voiceover, unless you're making it yourself, you can do whatever you want. In which case, I actually do recommend people to find a second ear to help you direct that if you wrote the story yourself,
Right.
just to have a second opinion on the performance. But usually, you always have somebody that hires you to essentially bring their vision to life. Um, One for me, when I look at a script today, I can guess with a pretty good idea that this is probably the style they're looking for. Therefore, this is probably the kind of voice that they're going to want for it. This is the audience that they're trying to reach, and from there, it's about, can we find the right actor for this? And usually, you never find the perfect person. It's well, I shouldn't say never. It's rare that you find the perfect person where you hear
Right.
the audition, you go, okay, done. We don't need anything else. Right? But you identify the people that you think would be a good fit for it, and then once they come in, it's a little bit of back and forth to see. Um, you said it's almost like you are trying to share your vision, which hopefully is in line with the client's vision,
Right.
with the actor's vision. So the way that I approach a script is always with an end goal in mind, that is flexible, such that whichever actor that we end up working with um, will be able to achieve within the range of what the client is looking for. Um, but yeah, like that's how I view more of a holistic project, as a holistic project vision. And then performance wise, it's just okay, let's keep the audience in mind. Who's going to be watching this, uh, and is the person watching the person you're talking to in this scene? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And then establish some key motivating factors, the goals that you're trying to achieve, where the climax is, how do you plan to build up to the climax and resolve from the climax, and the rest is communication. Um, I'm coming from more of the voice director side than the voice actor side, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah,
Yeah. No
so
problem.
that's the way that I tend to approach a script.
Nice. That's cool, because it's always good to hear from directors like, this is what we're looking for. This is the process we're going, because it's that way people aren't guessing. They're like, oh, cool. This is what I trained for, and I know what to put the tools that I learned in training to work here when I go for this project that I'm working on. So, in your experience, what are some things that you think an actor should avoid that could like bite them down the line?
Avoid making assumptions. When you first see a script, it's very easy to get a vision for the script,
Mm-hmm.
um, because everybody has a vision when they read a text. Usually, when you read a book, you kind of start watching a movie in your mind. It's the same kind of thing when you look at a script. You go, "Oh, of course, this script should be done in this way."
Right.
But the catch of that is, if your vision is different from the director's vision, and you're already stuck in that vision, it could be very tedious to try and get you out of that,
Right.
to the direction that we may want you to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's also partially why when we hold auditions or anything like that, we don't give the script ahead of time so that the actors don't practice it.
Mm-hmm.
expect them to come in, do a cold read, and then we can mold them into the direction that we'd like to. And I think that's the biggest thing. Um, an understanding that your vision is more likely than not going to be different from either the casting director or the director or the clients. And the only that being said, right, give your best performance of whatever that vision is. Don't get stuck to it, but have that clear vision. Show us your vision, and then we can show you what we are or how ours is different from that.
Right. That totally makes sense. And that's a good thing to know because I've done it before. A lot of other actors have done it before. They're like, okay, I got a script. This is what it's going to be. They go with it. And then when they find out it was like a 360 to begin with, then it's like, that's one of the reasons why we also had training, because it's like, oh, I wasn't this way. So it's time for me to adjust. And because I see a lot of people ask, how do I get into voiceover? Oh, I have this great voice. And then you ask them, one, can you act, and two, can you change, can you flip on a dime right there? Can you, if you show up with this invested idea that it's supposed to be one way, like you put the time, money, and energy into it and whatever resources are needed, and they tell you that is absolutely what we are not looking for, can they flip on a dime immediately, say, okay, well, why don't you tell me what you're looking for, and I will do my job to spit that out?
Yeah, like kind of along those lines, some of the things that really impress me when I work with an actor um, is their flexibility, the fact that they can change. The other is the control and the dexterity of that control. How like how specific can you make those changes? And that comes into like their vocal controls, their mechanical control, their technique, and all of that. And a lot of the time, we're not looking for like complete shift in character or anything.
Right.
Uh, and I guess the third point would be their ability to hear the difference. Because when push comes to shove, we will give a take of what we want you to sound like, and whether we do it ourselves or we give you a recording or something from another actors and say, we need you to sound like this, but as your character. And that could be like a simple inflection change here, a little bit of tonal difference there. And an actor with a good ear and good control of their voice will get that after one listen. And that's always makes the entire process a lot simpler for us because we know there's always the fallback of I can just do something for you to mimic, or I can just tell you, hey, I need to change this one spot here, but keep everything else the same. And if they're able to do that pretty much on call, which many professional actors can, I think that's a very strong quality to have. It shows directability, and we love people who are directable.
I totally agree with that. It just makes the job so much easier, and it's like you're not struggling with them to either whether they either don't understand how to deliver, or if they're just straight up like a diva about it, say, well, I think it should be this way, I think it should be that way. You're working together coherently to
Yeah.
get a task done.
Well, not so much like the diva aspect. I don't
Hmm.
think I've met too many actors who are divas, uh, but I do know like habits can build very quickly. One line, if they read it three times the same way, habit is already forming around that line. But if I go, all right, I can't, for instance, can you shift your pitch up over here with an emphasis on the third word, and I want you to drop it at the end, but I need the volume to continue to rise. Like, how specifically can I direct you mechanically to
Right.
adjust those? Now, different actors work different ways. Some will prefer those kind of very specific yes or no directions, or like binary directions, I guess. Get louder or get softer, right? Get faster or get slower. Other actors prefer emotional directions, where like angrier, you are now livid, you are frustrated, right? Um, it's always kind of like how easily can we mesh? Right? How easily can you understand my directions? And some actors I know they already understood the direction, but they just can't do what they are thinking of in their mind. They know they need to change this, and when we play it back, they can hear that it hasn't changed yet. But when they're doing it, for some reason, they don't have the control to actually perform what they want to do, and that's frustrating for the actor. Um, and overall, it slows down the recording session. But like for us, it's normal that it happens. It can happen to the best of actors. But it is a, how do you say, it is a skill that I think people can learn to do over time as a part of their vocal training.
Agreed, definitely, and I think you worded it perfectly with that. So, uh, on the topic of directing, or actually, let's see, shifting topics from here because directing is extremely important, and actors should know how to, or definitely learn it, how to adjust to it. So, going from that, what trends have you noticed recently in your area of the industry, like in in your type of work, that have started coming up more so?
In what regards?
So let's see, for narration and commercial or any of those topics, are there new trends? Like a lot of people talk about the the natural read, kind of like how we're talking right now.
Um, yes and no. I think there are micro trends that happen in very specific areas, and that tends to be like, um, so for instance, I know with, and this is me hearing as a secondhand knowledge now, but I hear from Lala Pettis. She's an agent from New York who
Nice.
teaches classes with us, and she was telling us that the current trend for clients is to find a more laid back, chill kind of a conversational read. Uh, and it's like you want to be the person everyone wants to be friends with rather than you want to be that friend, is the way that I understood it when she mentioned it, um, which I think makes sense, right? As a current trend, yes, there are commercials that lean toward that aspect, and you hear it online. Um, and there's also a lot of these spoken word poetry type of reads that they're preferring these days. That being said, it is a very broad market out there, and the the works that goes on TV, that goes on radio, that anything that you can see or hear publicly, that makes up a very small portion of the work that comes up.
Right.
So, as much as trends are interesting to know, and if you see those keywords, then you would know what it means. Like they're looking, it's like, for instance, commercial work. We're looking for a young voice that's a little more laid back. You kind of, if you're familiar with that trend, you know the style that they're wanting. But though, like, that's one job amongst these thousands that you're going to potentially audition for. And it's not like, 300 out of 1,000 jobs, it's all going to be like, if anything, maybe 20 out of 1,000 jobs you might see is all going to be in line with the trend, where everything else is up in the air. And it's also the idea of, let's not try to impersonate, right? Right? You can always be that new trend if you give a good enough delivery of anything. There's archetypes in animation. Of course, there's the heroic voice. There is the princess voice, right? Kind of like the Barbie voice. There is the the sidekick voice, the nerdy voice. Right? People go, anime only ever have like 6 different voice actors, but that's not true. It's just many of them tend to lean toward a certain archetype and sound similar. But when you actually put them side by side, you can tell they're completely different.
Right.
You have a similar personality because the characters themselves have similar personalities, but the voice wise could be a wide range of voices. So yes, trends exist. Um, and it may or may not be beneficial depending on where you are in your VO career. But I think for new actors, it doesn't make a difference. Even for many experienced actors, knowing it is just a good to know kind of back in your mind thing. The work that the more experienced the actor, the better they know why people come to them. Right? Now, is it because they come to them because they are similar to the trending voice, or is it because they come to them that is because they are their own voice, or for whatever reason? I think people should focus more on what their own strengths are and market toward those strengths, regardless of what the trends are.
That's a really good point to bring up in talking about people's own strengths. Because when I had started booking coaching, my coach had told me at the time, you want to focus about what's in your wheelhouse, because especially if you're new, because nobody's seen what's in the wheelhouse to begin with. So why not start off on a strong note and put that out there first? So that is a really good point to bring up about that. So speaking of wheelhouse, you speak more than just one language, which, from what I've seen, that opens up the market to completely different areas. And it doesn't just do that in voice, it does that obviously in other jobs as well. But since we're talking about voice here, what has that been like to use your voice in more than just one language and going into those markets?
Um, I would say the strongest point is in communication. Um, Foreign clients always prefer to work with someone that speaks their language fluently. And even if you, like, a lot of my clients also speaks English, and I do communicate them at least more on like technical things. I will always use English to communicate because it is my best language, right, to use. That being said, if there is communication trouble or I feel like there might be a misunderstanding in terms of what I'm trying to communicate on the English front, I can use, for instance, Chinese or Japanese to communicate with the client to say, no, 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 this is what I meant. And on the client side, they know that if they don't understand anything that I'm saying, uh, I can still communicate that to them in a way that they do understand. So it feels like a safety net for them. Um, this area of work, or rather, not specifically to voiceover industry, but to any industry, I think the world is more and more global. Uh, just about any client that deals with a foreign country will have a foreign country department where the primary language will be English that's used there. And like their English are very good. So it's not like you're trying to go, talking with someone who's in ASL, going slowly and making sure that they understand. You can just talk normally, write normally, and if they don't understand something, they'll ask. But generally, communications, um, for the most part, you can get away with in English. That being said, it's usually just the what do you say, the foreign facing person
Mm-hmm.
that speaks good English. And this person then takes whatever communication you give them and has to go back and translate that and talk to their managers in their language. So having the multiple languages, or rather having essentially for me just Japanese and Chinese, allows me to directly speak with the managers in their language, and in that way there isn't like a telephone thing that's happening, because you never know how many tiers that this message has to go out before the green light goes on the project.
Yep.
um, I have had clients that goes, yeah, we wanted to work with you because we can talk to you. And it does also open up the local businesses that has no foreign facing personnel to do the communications. And I go in and I say, well, I can either work with you, right, in your local side using Japanese or Chinese, or I can be that foreign facing person helping you find actors over here, helping you negotiate with agents over here and other studios over here. So um, I guess for me, the opportunity opens up in that I can be the intermediary, like from the studio side, on all sorts of work that you may need or you may be interested in on the foreign side. So for voice actors, if you do speak their language, and there are, for instance, a lot of mobile game studios over in Asia that they want English voice actors for. There are e-learning companies that makes ESL content to teach the kids in their country how to speak English. So they need English actors, but they're very timid, so they're scared to reach out to English voice actors because they don't speak the language very well. This is when if you speak their language, then they're more open and they're more inclined to hire you. I know, for instance, in China, they hire voice actors who are English teacher that they happen to find on the street and go, "Oh, you're a foreigner teacher. Can you come to our studio and record some e-learning content for our kids?" And that's how they find their voice actors. They're not like, and these teachers aren't trained actors or anything. They just speak beautiful English. Um, so we actually had a few students at the school come in where they got into voiceover because they were one of those teachers, and they got hired to do voiceover when they were over in China. And then after they came back, like, oh, that was interesting. I want to know more about voiceover. So I think language does open up different doors in different ways. Uh, but even if you don't speak it, feel free to reach out, right? Because there is a lot of businesses there that are desperately looking for native speakers. If you have acting training behind your English, I think that's just one additional strength that is quite rare in many other countries.
That's good to know, and it's a really good point to touch on because one of the things I noticed was so we were speaking about anime earlier, and I was watching the English stuff for Tomo-chan's a girl, and they had Sally Amaki in there, and she was Carol. The thing was, which I've almost never heard of, except very rarely, was that she was the same character in both the dub and the sub, and to like talk about versatility, that was great. And I went to look back at them, and I was like, oh wow, you hear her just on point for both characters in each language. So she had more to offer to the pool in general. And then I just found out for Overwatch, I think she was one of the new heroes in there, and someone had told me online. I was like, "Are you kidding me? That was her? Like, no way! That sounds great." Because then it was obviously English from there, but it's really cool to see this kind of thing taking off, or just in general being utilized, and in games like Overwatch, anime, and one of my favorite games that I never did beat was Sekiro. And for one of the fights they asked, do you want Japanese dialogue or do you want English? Most of the time I picked English, but for one fight I was like, I think I should turn the dialogue into Japanese. It's fine. I know how to fight. So they're not going to tell me anything that I should probably know how to do in general. And it was so fun. It really amped up the immersiveness for it in general. And despite how hard the game was, because it's a Souls game, it was still really entertaining and fun to be to get a real glimpse into that kind of culture in general.
Yeah, I definitely think like, um, well, firstly, anybody that can be, doing both languages of the same dub, right, the Japanese and the English dub,
Mm-hmm.
that is insane levels of skills. That means that you've reached a level of performance that is castable, which is above 99% of the population,
Mm-hmm.
in both languages. And having um, I think there is a lot of insight when you know the original language, you perform the character in the original language, uh, you know this character inside out, and because you're just as fluent in English, to then go about that in the English character, That is a phenomenal feat that she achieved. And I do hope that they actually do that more often with her,
Mm-hmm.
having her voice both sides of the dub. Yeah, and it's kind of the, what do you say, there is always some loss, whether in cultural points or in translation points, when you go from an original language into a new language. But having the actor, like the same actor for both, I think it's there is no doubt in my mind that that would improve the overall quality of the performance uh, in the new dub, in a sense that it's truer to the original. Not all dubs are meant to be true to the original, which I think is totally fine. But in a genuine, how do you say, in the genuine sense of a localization, I think that is a great thing to be able to do if available.
Agreed. I definitely agree because I really enjoyed it. I said I gotta go see I gotta see the sub of this. They're telling me it's the same voice actors. You gotta be kidding me. I looked at it. I was like, oh my god. It's like like you just said. I saw what came from the sub carried into the dub, and then uh, combined with what the language was, with English in this case, to just bring out something completely authentic and a joy to read or listen to. So it was good. So on the topic of culture, because we were talking about Asian culture. Myself, I happen to be I'm Samoan, so all the way to that island somewhere in Hawaii, I think, it's past Hawaii. What would you say is, because the one thing I've noticed is my parents were constantly like, okay, we're going to raise you on your culture. We're going to inform you about it. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, thanks. And just learning about it caused me to have a great appreciation for it. And then getting into the arts as well, it's a big spot to where these kind of things, cultural differences in general, really start to shine and bring out the best in stories. One of my favorites when it came to Asian art, because I'm from San Francisco, was I would say Ghost of Tsushima when it came to video games. We saw a lot of um, Asian actors really who look like they appreciated where they came from, and a chance to then share that with the world. What would you say in general has allowed, like, what does knowing your culture in general bring to your artistic endeavors?
Mm, I think culture, like especially our own cultures, right, is something that a lot of the times that I guess we take for granted, where thing to us it's the norm. Right? Like we take off our shoes when we go in the house because that's a norm.
Right.
We use chopsticks to eat soup because sometimes that's a norm. Debatable for but loving bubble tea seems to be a norm in Asians, right? So those kind of things are um, how do you say, there's there's a lot of things that we, or rather people from that culture, will do automatically that is lost when you have someone who's perhaps not from the culture
Mm-hmm.
try to do the same thing. And those little things that are lost is ultimately where I think um, the awkwardness come in.
Mm-hmm.
That may not go well with the audience who knows the culture. Japanese people speaking and bowing while they're on the phone uh, is is very normal to them, and it's a habit. And to this day, I still do that even when I talk in English.
Mm-hmm.
So these little things, when like individually they might not seem like a big thing, but when you have everything, like, oh, that's missing, oh, that's missing too, oh, why didn't you do that, or oh, that didn't seem like someone from my culture would do. I think that's where the appreciation of the culture will come in when you hire people who grew up in that or having that as their norm. So it's difficult for me to explain like um, what is or isn't right about, say, a particular performance or a particular product that was made. But when you look at it, you just go, something doesn't feel completely right.
Hmm.
Right? Um, and it's I'm not going to say it's good or bad because it could be a directing choice, it could be a stylistic choice, or they might just want to purposefully make it vague. For instance, Avatar comes to mind, right? It's Asian culture, but it's not specific to any particular Asian um, community, not specific to Japanese or Chinese or Korean or Malaysian or whatever it might be, but it has that aura about it. So I think it's as long as it achieves the goals of the project,
Hmm.
uh, and it'll feel authentic in that way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So another question I had for you was, what is it that you recommend actors do when they're training? Like, where should they start in terms of training? What are some fundamentals? Because when I started acting training, I literally started at acting fundamentals and just kind of went on repeat. Partly because it was fun and it gave me an easy grade, but at the same time, it was informative.
Yeah. I think that depends on what you view as the first step into acting training.
Right.
So if it's like one day, right, somebody who's never done voice acting, one day they go, "Oh, voice acting looks really interesting because I just watched this celebrity do a studio session, it looks really fun." Then the first step would be, well, try it. Like, you can go on CCC. There's a bunch of projects you can audition for. You can find a group of friends. You can try some voiceover with them. There's a lot of different voiceover communities out there where you can just read a few scripts together. And if that's fun, right, and that's fun the first time, do it a second time and keep doing it. And eventually, you're just by having this as a hobby, you're going to reach a point where you go, I think I know what doing this as a career might be like, and I want to take it more seriously. And this could be 1 year down the line, this could be 10 years down the line of doing this as a hobby. It doesn't really matter. And at some point, you decide, I want to take it seriously. That's when I think you can start taking classes, find a coach, right? And essentially build your performance skill to a good enough level. There's no ceiling to art. There's no perfection to art. That's why I say a good enough level. It's always subjective.
Hmm.
But once you get there, the rest is okay, how do I make a career out of this? What is the end goal? So when you first start, it can be like, my first goal is to get paid for my voice. Doesn't matter how much, I just want to get some money. Even if it's $1, I'm going to get paid for my voice. And then after that, you go, all right, now my next goal, right? Maybe I want to do 100 auditions a month, right? And to see if you can do that, because I think that's at least many of the very successful people that got there at a very fast pace. Um, One of the commonalities was they were doing 100 auditions a month. Um, that's not an exaggerated number. They did do 100 auditions a month.
True.
And usually, if they do that within 1 or 2 years, they're already in shows. They might get their Netflix show. They might have found an agent. Uh, but this is usually after they've also reached a point in their performance where they are ready to do that. And their voice coach, whoever that they've been working with, would be able to tell them that. And I think you're getting to a proficient level. And internally, when they compare themselves with other amateurs, they're like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. And even sometimes when they hear a pro, they go, oh, I think I can do that too. And you can listen to some of the deliveries from their formal, from the people that inspired them to become voice acting. They go, I think I can do that today. And then they go in and they start essentially building their own pie, right? Making their own pie in this industry, getting their voices heard, getting more network connected with other actors, casting directors, just everyone all around. And eventually they find their own niche within this industry somewhere. We always look at the we say the video games, and we always look at the animation work. But realistically, very few people who are making a career in voiceover are in that side of voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
There is more people that are making 5 figures, 6 figures in voiceover, that are doing work that is never public, or it's in a very limited sense publicized. Right? So that's the like in terms of what should voice actors do. Well, just keep doing it if you enjoy it. Once you're ready to take it serious, then take it seriously. Now it's a career, it's no longer just a passion. Now you have to hold yourself accountable to reach the goals that you have. And I guess a little advice on setting goals is make sure to set goals that you have control over. Don't set goals like, I want to get cast in Final Fantasy 23.
Right.
That decision is not up to you. Mm-hmm. But setting a goal of something like, I want to do 100 auditions. I want to, I want to find out who all the agents are in the LA region and reach out to them. I want to identify 7 studios that does, say, if video games is what you want to do, I want to find 7 studios that records for video games and figure out who their casting directors are, and then ask them out for coffee. Build some sort of relationship with them so that they are aware that you exist. Even if you're not quite up to, like, even though you're probably still amateur as an actor, your goal is to at least get them to know that you're working towards working with them. I actually have a really interesting story about one actor who emailed me one day, and this was years and years ago, so I hope he's still doing it. I'm not sure, but he's in Edmonton. Mm-hmm. Basically, he emailed me, he's like, "Hi John, I'm interested in getting into voice acting. I would love to work with you one day." That was the first email that I got. And he attached this little sample he recorded, and I listened to it, and it was crap. So I ignored it. Well, I say that in the best of sense.
Right.
This story has a good ending. So
okay.
The first email he gave me was crap. I ignored it. And like 2-3 years later, he emailed me again. And he was like, "Hey John, I hope you've been doing well. Over the last, or was it 2 years ago, I sent you an email letting you know my interest in working with you. Just wanted to let you know, since then I've been working with a coach, and these are some of the things that I've done over the years, and I wanted to essentially reach out to you again in hopes that you will consider me for whatever work that we have." And I listened. He submitted a new demo for me. I listened to it, and it was like night and day, right? Of course, it's had a coach, mm-hmm. And he was at a level where he was ready to make a demo. He made a professional demo. He sent that over, and it made a very deep impression in me because he reached out to me 2 years ago. And I actually remembered that he reached out to me 2 years ago because of how bad his audition was. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I saw the email. I was like, oh wow, this person's still doing it. He's obviously making improvements. So I responded this time saying, "Hey, thanks for reaching out. I loved your demo. If you have some opportunities, we'd love to have you audition for it." And then I think a couple of weeks later, we got a video game gig. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Hey, do you want to try out for this?" He auditioned, and I said, "The client's really interested in having you, but can you drive down to Calgary to do it?"
Right.
And yeah, he did. He
nice.
drove 2 hours down to the city, did one tiny little role with us, and then he went back up. Mm-hmm. He had some friends here that he visited while he was here too. Mm-hmm. We didn't work together afterwards because I think it's not really worth it for him to come like so far for these kind of little roles.
Right.
But it did lead him to working with us, and I hope he's having a lot of success up there because BioWare is up there. So maybe doing some good work over there too. I'm not sure. But I I think um, many people remember commitment and relationships that you intentionally try to kindle.
Mm-hmm.
He could have just, not reach out again. He's in Edmonton. He doesn't need to work with us,
Mm-hmm.
but he decided to reach out, and I appreciated that he was obviously taking things more seriously now, and that he's been doing this long enough that if he needed to do a retake for us, or there's a new expansion for this game and he needed to come back a year later, most likely he would still be there. And that's part of the reason why we are more skeptical when a brand new actor reach out to us and say, "Hi, um, I want to work with you."
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's the first time an actor reaches out to us, unless this actor already have extensive experience, there's always the risk of, what if I need to find them 3 months down the road and they decided to quit voice acting? Well,
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And it's, again, you mentioned that commitment and that dedication, which a lot of newer voice actors, I notice, they think that, I sign up for this and I'll probably end up in Final Fantasy 21 right there, just off the bat. And it's like 9.9 times out of 10, no. Like once in a while, it's like, well, is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. But at the same time, a meteor touching down on Earth is also possible as well. It's just that probability right there, and then you add in a bunch of other probabilities versus the rest of the actors going, we're going to work until we get to a point that we are satisfied with. Whether it's, I got to put money, I got to invest in my career. That's how I started as well. Like, I determined this is what I want to do at the time, and I went forward with it. And I ran into so many challenges. Like, literally, my first job as an audiobook narrator will never see the light of day ever again. Fortunately, because I still have the audio clip, and I make it a point not for it to not be known, because I know, oh, this is where I started, and then I compare it to where I'm at now, and that it's important of having what a little bit of dedication can do to anything to improve someone's craft, their skills, or anything like that.
yeah, like it's kind of going back to, what sort of training should they look into and stuff. So at different points in your VO, even after you decide to make it a career, unless you're extremely lucky, you will always hit roadblocks. You will reach some point where you will feel like you are plateauing. And um, this is where the imposter syndrome tend to come in for many people. And it's like, hey, I thought I was on this nice trajectory, but now it seems like I'm flatlining. If not, I'm pulling back a little bit, and it starts to demotivate you and things like that. Some people can get over this. Some people get lucky and get another big thing right after, right? And then so this keeps going longer. But eventually, everybody reaches a certain point. And for many people, it happens before they're able to make it a career. Um, that being said, if your goal is to have full-time income just doing voiceover work, that's very different from, I'm okay with having voiceover give me some income while I have a day job working somewhere else. So in terms of training, it's sort of like, what do you want as the end goal as a voice actor? I call working pros, right? The people who has full-time job and doing voiceover on the side. Those are working pros. They're phenomenal actors. Many of them are phenomenal actors, and they're not looking to make voiceover a full-time job. And I think that's totally fine too. But if that's your goal and you're happy with that, then maybe you don't need anything else. You already have that career. And then other people are struggling, trying to make voiceover their sole income, and they might be making the same amount in voiceover as someone who's a working pro, but they're not satisfied with where they're at. So that's when they might look for further training. And for anybody like that, my encouragement is usually that they're most likely already great actors. So performance skills is likely not what's holding them back from essentially making it a full-time career. They need to identify what that missing piece is, right? And I think a lot of artists tend to focus too much on the art itself. You always think I must be not good enough as an actor, and that's why I'm failing. And that's especially once you get to the level where you're already landing, mobile games and video games and corporate narrations and maybe one or two commercials here and there. That means you're already good enough as an actor to land roles. The rest is, um, I mean, there's a big chunk, and I associate it with business in a very broad sense. Your marketing, it could be your networking, it could be your management skills, it could be your communications with corporate people, it could be uh, a slew of different things. So you have to identify that, and it's probably more beneficial for them to take courses that aren't industry related. If networking is where you think you're lacking, take a networking course that has nothing to do with voiceover. Learn networking, and then take the concepts you learn from there and figure out how you can apply those in voiceover. If it's marketing, take a marketing course. Take those learning points and then figure out how that applies to voiceover. And if you're having trouble with that, you can take my business course, which that's exactly what I do.
There we go.
But I do think that at some point, actors need to become business students. We always, I think many people had heard the term saying voiceover is a business, and therefore you know the business of voice acting. It's not so much the business of voice acting, it's you need to know business, and voice acting is where you're trying to apply business to. So um, understand, how do you say, once you, if you are someone who is feeling like you don't know what to do to expand your horizons, feeling like you have some client base now, but you're having trouble getting new clients, that's probably when it's good to take a step back and look at, other than acting, right? You probably already know a lot about this industry. You probably already know a lot about studio etiquette, about talking with agents, because every single workshop within the industry talks about those kind of things. So if that's not where things are holding you back from, or if that's not where you can identify where your lack of knowledge is at, take a step back on you as a person and where you can still grow. And hopefully that will lead you or give you some inspiration on where your further training can occur.
Definitely, and that's a really good point to bring up, because you see people throwing out money, because it is money to get classes. They're like, I'm gonna throw it here, and just it's I'm gonna throw all this money out and see where it lands, versus let me figure out where's the best place my investment will stick for me. Mm-hmm.
I think it's risk, right? It's that when you take a workshop that's meant to improve acting, um, these workshops are really great when you're first starting out, because you're going to feel like your acting gets so much better after each one.
Mm-hmm.
It's also because you're starting at a very low level of performance, and it's always like a logarithmic curve where it gets harder and harder to improve your skills once you reach a certain point. You'll forever improve after each one, but maybe not at the same acceleration as you did when you first started. And it's going to be the same with regards to any skill. So if, for instance, you're a very good actor, but you're a very lousy communicator, the same kind of growth that you had when you first started acting is going to happen once you start taking communication courses. And that, hopefully, that will encourage you to say, hey, I'm growing as an individual, I'm growing as a human being. And that will help improve all of your relationships, which eventually, in my opinion, will lead to additional work, will lead to different types of work. And it'll essentially connect you with a brand new group of people that you would never come to interact with if you continue within just this bubble. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of When I first started, I started networking a lot with the people of the industry. Eventually, I reached a level where I'm comfortable. And then I stopped trying to network with new people. I just try to kindle the relationships that I've built up over the years.
Right.
And that also, I think, is one reason why people stagnate. Um, but it's based on a lot of assumptions that I'm making as well. So to each their own.
It's all good. So this has honestly been great hearing you share about all of this, and it's important for actors to know honestly. So as we wrap up, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I think it's John Wang VO is my handle. You can also just come to closingcredits.com. It's our VO school. We have a ton of different courses offered by a ton of different teachers from all over the industry. We recently launched our ADR course on there,
Nice.
two of them, where we invited dubbing directors. So you're going to have a different director every single week that you get to work with on all sorts of different content. And it's designed in a way where you can just keep repeatedly taking it because it's going to be a different director. We're building a growing list of roster of such directors to come in. So we're very excited to share that. And yeah, feel free to reach out. My DMs are always open.
Yep. Thank you again. This has been awesome. Everybody, the links that John has mentioned will be included in the description below, including closing credits and his Twitter. Once again, thank you, John. I really appreciate it and hearing everything you had to share with us. Is there anything else that you would like to say to everyone?
Good luck and don't be a stranger.
There we
Thanks for
go.
having me, Richie.
Yeah, no problem. Hit that like, subscribe button. Check out John's work and content in the description below. And I'll see you guys around.